a grandfather found murdered in his Florida home.
We saw a body wrapped up in a rug.
He had been shot. June, Florida weather, it was hot. The body started decomposing quicker.
Detectives fear his wife might also be a victim.
You gotta have a dead body on the floor. She's missing. We actually thought somebody came, killed him, and took her.
Detectives started asking me, did he have any enemies? And I'm like, no, like, absolutely not.
But the investigation reveals both parties were occupied by their own affairs.
He didn't just love one woman, he loved women. And she's having affairs, she's bringing men into the house.
What's your relationship? Friends, sex? No friends.
But a shocking confession takes the case in a different direction, leading to a killer on the brink of despair.
She was tired of him treating her like she was dirt.
He said that he would marry a dog before he would marry me.
She purchased a ticket for Canada. She was trying to get out the country.
She is to be considered armed and dangerous.
She just fired rounds until the gun was empty.
June 23rd, 2009. It's a humid summer morning in Lake City, Florida, when detectives are called to the scene of a reported dead body.
We received a call from Broward County Sheriff's Office, and they had an informant that stated there was a murder committed here in Lake City. But we didn't have that much information.
Broward County had gotten information from one of their confidential informants saying that the person in the residence was a guy by the name of Tommy Kellum, that he had been shot.
Property records reveal there is a Tommy Kellum who lives in the area, and investigators race to his address.
When I arrived, you can smell the body before you can actually walk all the way up to the house. We walk around, announce ourselves, try to look in the windows. No one answered, so at that time we made a decision to go in. And I kicked in the door. We saw what appeared to be a body wrapped up in a rug and with bags on the feet and head. CSI Detective Finner unwrapped the body.
His body had swollen up so badly that the necklace that he was wearing was indented into his body.
He'd been there for a couple of days. It was hot, no air on.
One of the investigators on scene knows the homeowner from around town and confirms the gruesome discovery.
Knowing Tommy Kellum all my life, I knew it was Tommy Kellum on the floor, deceased.
There were a couple places that appeared to be holes in the chest, one in the upper chest and one in the lower chest. So we assumed that those were gunshot wounds.
You know, being in June, Florida weather, it was hot. The body started decomposing quicker than if it would have been cooler weather. So we needed to get out there and find out exactly when somebody had heard from Mr. Kellum so we can determine about when the incident occurred and to find out exactly what took place and the reasons why.
It is a really close-knit neighborhood. Everybody knew Tommy Kellum. I never seen him, upset or, mistreating anyone. He was just a good guy.
Tommy Kellum was born in 1933 in Hatch Bend, Florida. He was the eldest of 9 children, and a family tragedy forced him into a leadership role at an early age.
My grandparents were sharecroppers and they worked in the fields. My father was a teenager when he lost his father and his mother. We do not know the cause of death for my grandfather, but they said my grandmother died of a broken heart. All the boys were older, So they went to the fields, they worked, and they took care of the family. They were children taking care of children.
My grandfather, he learned, hard work, perseverance. He had to make sure that they had everything that they needed.
Once Tommy's siblings were old enough to take care of themselves, he set off on his own. And the strong work ethic he developed served him well.
My dad moved to Lake City, and he bought him some trucks, and he started his own pulpwood business.
My grandfather's business was very successful. Entrepreneurship is just like in his blood.
With success came a newfound sense of style and purpose.
My grandfather felt like appearance was important. You can't just look any kind of way. You have to look like you love yourself. So he always took pride in how he dressed. He was very stylish.
In 1954, when he was 21 years old, Tommy fell in love with a young woman named Daisy. They married and started a family together.
They got a house together, and I came along. A few years, maybe 2 years after, I had a great relationship with my dad. I didn't want for anything. My father made sure of that. He loved racing. He loved his motorcycle, and he loved women. He didn't just love one woman. He loved women.
Unfortunately, Tommy's wandering eye took a toll on his marriage.
They got along, but you cannot say they had the greatest relationship, because who wants to be cheated on? Who wants their feelings hurt?
Tommy's wife waited until their daughter grew up and moved out of the house to file for divorce.
Once their marriage was over, she wanted to basically cut all ties where my father was concerned.
He spent the next few decades enjoying his freedom.
He was handsome. He had his own business. He always had a pocket full of money. So, of course, the women love that.
In his 60s, Tommy retired from the pulpwood business. In 2003, when he met a beautiful younger woman named Brenda Watson, he finally seemed ready to settle down.
The age difference was about 30 years. That really wasn't an issue for me. It was just whatever aura she let off, it just did not match my energies for the woman that should be with my father. She didn't have a car. She didn't have a job. It just, I could not understand why you're with this woman.
I welcomed her in, regardless of how others may have felt about her. I felt like if my granddaddy liked it, I love it.
Despite their 30-year age gap, Tommy and Brenda were perfect for each other.
Brenda made him, feel just a little spark of youth back. She was young and fun.
After dating for a few years, Tommy, now in his 70s, decided to ask Brenda to marry him.
At that point, he's getting older, and I feel like maybe he just did not want to grow old by himself.
Whatever my grandfather wanted to do, Brenda would do. She would be right beside him. She was just like a part of the family.
But their May-December romance has come to a disturbing end after Tommy's body was found decomposing in their Florida home. Brenda is not at home to provide any answers, but other friends and family have already started to show up at the house.
I got a call early that morning from a friend of mine, and she said, "Come to Lake City, the police at your daddy's house."
I received a phone call from my mom. She says, "Go to Granddaddy's house and see what's going on." As I was walking up, one of the detectives pulled me to the side, and he confirmed that it was my grandfather. I just felt sick to my stomach. It's not even a word to describe it. Like, I felt like everything was just crashing down.
LaTuana tells detectives she thought her grandfather had been out of town for the past few days.
It was Father's Day weekend, and I had been calling my grandfather, trying to talk to him. I was not able to get an answer, so then, I called Brenda. And she says, we came down here to Lauderdale to, see some of my family. I was like, okay, well, I tell you what, tell him to call me back.
To investigators, the timeline doesn't add up. They question if Tommy ever made it to Fort Lauderdale to begin with.
We was kind of confused, what was going on. He's on the floor dead. Brenda's missing. We actually thought somebody came, killed him, and took her.
The outstanding question for us was, where was Brenda Watson?
Brenda's not there, so you don't know if she's possibly a victim in a situation gone bad or a suspect.
Coming up, investigators get a crucial lead.
I got a finger on this missing and old man's head.
And they discover the truth about Tommy and Brenda's marriage.
Brenda resided here at the residence, but it was not as husband and wife.
After discovering 76-year-old Tommy Kellum shot dead inside his home, detectives in Lake City, Florida fear that his wife, Brenda Watson, could also be in danger.
We try to get a hold of some relatives because that was the last place that we knew that Brenda was. Well, both of them was.
They are unable to reach anyone, but credit card records appear to confirm a trip to Fort Lauderdale about 300 miles away.
Tommy's wallet was missing, so we did a subpoena on his credit cards. It was established that the card was used multiple times in the Fort Lauderdale area.
The timestamps on those withdrawals put the couple in Fort Lauderdale over the weekend. The question for investigators is, what happened to them after that? They hope the crime scene holds the answer.
Detective Fenner was working the scene inside the residence and advised me that they had found 4 shell casings from a .22.
LaTuana told us that, her grandfather had guns, but the gun rack, it was empty.
The detective started asking me, did I know anyone that would want to hurt him? Did he have any enemies? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Could it be a robbery?
She advised us that her grandfather's truck was gone, so we started putting a bolo out for it.
As additional family members arrive at the scene, investigators learn more about Tommy and Brenda's relationship.
Brenda's lifestyle was she wanted to party, have fun, do what she wanted to do, come in all hours of the night, and Tommy didn't want any part of that. He was at the age to where he wanted to be settled down.
According to Cassandra, Brenda's behavior drove her father to end their marriage.
The neighbors are saying that she's having affairs, she's bringing men into the house. So that's, as far as I know, that was the reason for the divorce.
Brenda resided here at the residence, but it was not as husband and wife.
They had a roommate situation. At that point, my grandfather was making her pay bills.
But it seems Brenda often ignored the boundaries Tommy put in place.
According to the family, Brenda was jealous. She had to go everywhere Tommy went. Basically smothered him, wouldn't let him do anything.
Brenda had told LaTuana that she was in Broward County, where the tip about Tommy's murder originated.
So with the information that we received and then the family showing up at the scene, we now think that Brenda is possibly a victim or a possible suspect.
Columbia County detectives contact the Broward County Sheriff's deputy who received that tip and ask him to press his confidential informant for more details.
Well, he went back to the informant and told him, you need to tell me who giving you this information. And the informant told him the person named Jeffrey Love was involved. The informant said that Jeffrey went and told somebody that he helped his cousin kill somebody in Lake City. We still didn't know who Jeffrey Love or his cousin were.
Once we got the information, we then started going into his background, looking into what type of person he was.
Found out he had did some prison time, so that threw a red flag.
Jeffrey Love served 6 years in a South Carolina prison before being released on probation in 1996. It's unclear how he knows Tommy and Brenda or what he was doing in Florida.
Most of the people on the Washington Street area were good people. They looked out for each other. If we were out looking for someone, they usually knew who we were looking for.
No one knew of Jeffrey Love.
With their attempts to track down Jeffrey Love hitting a dead end, investigators turn their attention back to Tommy's personal life.
One source told us that Brenda was messing around with this guy named Eugene.
The alleged affair opens up new possibilities and motives.
You got a dead body on the floor. Brenda's missing. Now they're saying that Eugene was creeping with Brenda. I'm thinking he off Tommy Kellum to be with Brenda.
A public record search easily provides detectives with Eugene's address.
We went and picked him up, took him back to Columbia County Sheriff's Office in an interrogation room and spoke with him.
You know what's going on?
Yeah, I got a friend girl that's missing, and her old man is here.
When last time you talked with her?
Oh, I seen her Saturday morning.
Saturday would have been the 20th of June, and according to what Brenda told Tommy's granddaughter, they were in Fort Lauderdale at the time, 5 hours away. But Eugene says she met him at a restaurant there in Columbia County.
What's your relationship? Friends?
Friends.
Sex?
No friends. I done tapped it probably years ago, but gosh, man, that's a good-looking gal.
When last time you tapped it?
Oh, man.
Hey, you gotta be honest. You have to be honest.
It's probably been about 2 weeks ago.
After catching Eugene in a lie, investigators confront him with their suspicions.
I say, hey man, your name is ringing in the streets, man. And he was like, what? I said, man, Tommy's dead. And your name came up. And he was like, oh, hell no.
Oh, okay, then let's rock and roll, man. Let's get it. I got a wife. We need to kind of resolve this. I might get a divorce. So, this.
Eugene said that weekend he was with his family. So that was his alibi. I explained to Eugene that if I have to, I'm gonna go and ask his wife, was he home that weekend? And the cat's gonna be out the bag because I'm gonna tell her what was going on. So he assured me he was home. At the end of the interview, I believed him. I kind of figured he wasn't involved in it.
Willing to expose himself, investigators no longer believe Eugene is a suspect. Before concluding his interview, they ask him if he's heard of Jeffrey Love, and he says no. But according to him, there's someone else they should be considering.
She was saying something about he went back to his ex-girl or something, and
Who went back?
Tommy was going to see his ex-girl.
You don't know Tommy's ex-girl's name?
No, I really don't.
Detectives consider this information a new lead.
It's the first time I learned about the girlfriend. Don't know if it was more women out there that was upset and one of them came out and murdered him.
Tommy Kellum has been found murdered in his home, and no one has seen his wife, Brenda Watson, for 3 days. Investigators learned from Brenda's lover that Tommy was having affairs as well, and they revisit Tommy's family to see if they can provide a name.
Helen was my grandfather's girlfriend at one point in time. They had been dating on and off for years, but with him dealing with Brenda, Helen was dead set against, having any sort of romantic relationship as long as he was still with her.
I think after the divorce, him and Helen started seeing each other more.
But according to them, Helen is the last person who'd commit murder.
I call her my aunt. I know that she loved my grandfather tremendously.
There was no reason for her to harm him.
Tommy's daughter Cassandra tells investigators that the only conflict in his life came from Brenda and her jealousy.
Brenda had a problem with Helen. When my dad go play cards, Helen was the bartender there. Brenda would sit to that bar if she didn't do nothing but drink Sprite all night to make sure that my daddy had no interaction with Helen.
The more detectives learn about Brenda's relationship with Tommy, the less she looks like a second victim. This feeling further solidifies when Cassandra shares that Brenda's jealousy was sometimes accompanied by violence.
Helen called me and told me that Daddy had to go to the hospital because he was cleaning his gun and he shot himself in the hand. That's what he told me. She said he's not gonna tell the truth, but she say Brenda shot him. The gun incident happened after the divorce, maybe because she was mad. Maybe they were going through something. Nobody actually know because nobody was there with them. And my dad didn't tell the truth about the situation anyway.
So with the information that we received, we now know that Brenda is a possible suspect.
Investigators become even more convinced of Brenda's involvement after the coroner determines Tommy died on June 20th, the same day she met with her lover, Eugene.
The truck's missing, Brenda's gone. She's made contact with the family saying that Tommy was with her. We know that Tommy's not with her, that Tommy's actually the victim of a homicide.
Hoping to pinpoint Brenda's location, detectives obtain records of the withdrawals on Tommy's bank cards.
We seen that there was some large ATM withdrawals headed to Fort Lauderdale.
One of the ATMs obtained that Brenda did in fact use Tommy's card, and we got a still photo of her making a withdrawal.
Tommy's bank records also reveal a purchase made at a Walmart store near the restaurant where Eugene told detectives he'd met Brenda Saturday morning.
I traveled to the Walmart in Lake City to request the video and a receipt of the items purchased. When I arrived, they pulled up the video. It showed a black female and a black male. They purchased cleaning supplies.
The camera is too far away to identify the two individuals, but investigators spot a damning piece of evidence in their shopping cart.
They purchased a rug. It had a certain pattern to it, and I immediately recognized that pattern as the same as the rug that Tommy Kellum was wrapped up in.
Walmart security provides additional footage from the register the couple used to check out. The closer angle enables detectives to identify the woman as Brenda. The man with her remains a mystery, but he's clearly not Eugene, so detectives once again reach out to the Broward County Sheriff's Office and request their informant take a look at the video.
The black male was identified as Jeffrey Love by the confidential informant.
Coming up, a startling confession.
Look, I seen something wrapped in sheets. Get me the away from here.
And investigators launch a manhunt for their killer.
She is to be considered armed and dangerous.
It's becoming clear to detectives that Brenda Watson was involved in the death of her husband. And another piece of the puzzle falls into place when they discover her connection to Jeffrey Love.
No one knew of Jeffrey Love because he wasn't from Lake City. We found out that was Brenda's cousin.
The only information we got from Broward County Sheriff's Office, got from their informant saying that it was Brenda Watson and Mr. Love who were in the residence. It was unclear at the time which one had actually done the shooting.
We knew that she was running away, she was involved, and we wanted to know why and what happened.
To get answers, police need to find their suspects. Fortunately, a clue soon presents itself.
I got a phone call from Broward County advising that they had located Tommy's truck down in Fort Lauderdale at a Greyhound bus station.
Detective Brenda went to Broward County to process the truck. Nothing significant was found inside the truck, but in the bed of the truck was the mop that Brenda purchased from Walmart here in Lake City. Detectives went to the bus terminal and watched the video surveillance. We saw a male get out, who we positively identified as Jeffrey Love, and then we saw a female get out, who we kind of knew it was Brenda, didn't see her face, but the statue looked as of Brenda Watson.
Detectives watch Brenda and Jeffrey exit Tommy's truck and enter the bus terminal together. They each purchase tickets, but to different destinations.
He purchased a ticket back to South Carolina, and she purchased a ticket to Canada.
She was trying to get out the country.
We were already behind. They had purchased the tickets on that Saturday, so they had already been on the road 3 days.
Brenda's bus is still en route, but Jeffrey's has already made a stop in his home state of South Carolina.
We decided to go ahead and try to apprehend the male suspect, which was Jeffrey Love.
Arrest warrant was issued for Jeffrey Love for grand theft due to the fact we saw him get out the red truck at the bus terminal in Fort Lauderdale. We didn't have enough for an arrest warrant for murder, so that was the easiest way to get him back to Florida.
We contacted the law enforcement in South Carolina, advising that we had a warrant for Jeffrey's arrest. They went to his residence where he was apprehended and placed into custody.
Jeffrey surprises investigators by waiving his Miranda rights and agreeing to an interview. But that's where his cooperation ends.
He wasn't cooperating with us. He didn't want to tell us what his involvement was or what he knew about what happened.
The attorney who's going to be prosecuting this case, she said, Sarge, go back and ask him. He can either be a witness to this or he can be a suspect.
I'd rather be a witness.
There you go.
He indicated that he was out on probation, that he didn't need to get caught up into that. We felt different. We felt that there was more that he knew than he was telling us. So we continued to hammer him.
I'm not saying what you did. We're saying you're involved.
I'm telling you, I ain't have nothing to do with nothing, man.
After several hours of interrogation, Jeffrey finally seems to realize his predicament.
He thought he was just being arrested on the grand theft. Until I was like, no, you're about to get charged with homicide.
Like I said, Sarge, I told you that there, Sarge, I ain't got nothing to do with that. So if you gonna crucify me for that there, Sarge, or what?
Yeah, we just want to know what happened.
Sarge, I ain't trying to get in no trouble. But here it is, I'm in some trouble on some bullshit. Cause like I said, y'all ain't gonna let me go home. You know?
It's not up to me.
Who it up to?
It's up to you.
That's when he started talking a little bit.
She was trying to get me in the inside. I said, hell no. I smelled a foul odor.
Faced with the possibility of going back to prison, Jeffrey Love finally decides to come clean.
Just lay it out for us, Jeffrey. That's all we're asking.
He threw up his hands, and that's when he kind of confessed on what happened.
Jeffrey tells investigators he was at home on Saturday, June 20th, when Brenda called him out of the blue.
She said, cool. She said, come down here.
I said, Brenda, what's up? What's going on? What you done got yourself in?
15 minutes later, she called him and said that, I got you a bus ticket. He thought him and Brenda was going to go to some kind of, family function. That was his understanding.
I got on the bus Saturday night. I came down to Lake City. Sunday. I got down here Sunday between 10 and 11.
Jeffrey says Brenda picked him up at the bus station in Tommy's red pickup truck, but Tommy wasn't with her.
They went to Walmart, purchased cleaning supply, some trash bags, a throw rug.
She purchased all this stuff. That didn't draw your attention to something being with her? No, you know what though? Not really. Know why I say that? Because when she was getting all this stuff, guess what I was doing? I was looking at females.
After the shopping spree, Brenda dropped him off at his motel and left for a few hours.
When she came back to the motel and got me, that little boy over there.
They went and got something to eat. After they ate, he went to the house.
Jeffrey says that's when he found out the real reason Brenda asked him to come to Florida.
When I got to that door, and she was trying to get me in the inside, I said, hell no. When I got to that inside, I smelled a foul odor. When I was looking, I seen something wrapped in sheets. I said, get me away from here.
It was clear to Jeffrey that Brenda wanted him to help cover up a murder, but he didn't want any part of it.
He was adamant that he didn't do anything. He didn't help her do anything. He told her to take him to his cousins in Fort Lauderdale.
He said Brenda decided that they needed to clean what they could clean and then head out. On the way to Fort Lauderdale, Brenda had threw out the weapon that was used to kill Tommy Kellum.
Once Jeffrey got Fort Lauderdale, he said he told one of his cousin friends that what happened in Lake City. Well, this person went and told someone else that was an informant, and the informant went and told the detective. And that's when the detective contacted the sheriff's office.
Jeffrey's confession matches the evidence collected, so detectives are inclined to believe him.
Jeffrey Love's breaking point was when he realized that he was being charged with accessory to homicide.
And the condition of, for us not charging him was if he testified against Brenda.
But before Jeffrey can be put on the stand, Brenda has to be found and arrested before reaching her final destination in Canada.
On a manhunt now. Yeah, we're on a manhunt.
They were trying to follow the buses, and it was not going to be a guarantee that they could get her because she may have gotten off the bus at, a unknown location.
Florida police enlist the help of U.S. Marshals and plan to detain Brenda at one of the stops.
We missed the first one, which was in Georgia. Then we realized the next one would have been in Ohio and then to Cleveland. But we were behind on those as well. The next one that we knew for sure where she was going to be at would be Erie, Pennsylvania.
Erie, Pennsylvania is only 200 miles from Canada, so if investigators don't catch up with her there, she could get away entirely.
We were contacted and advised that the bus had already did the transfer of passengers. We asked if the bus terminal could contact the bus driver and try to get him to say that they're having mechanical problems and would have to come back to the bus station. When the bus driver turned the bus around, the Erie, Pennsylvania Police Department was there waiting. She was a homicide suspect, so she is to be considered armed and dangerous.
The bus arrives in Erie with Brenda still on board. She surrenders without a struggle.
So myself and Detective Sergeant Glenn White get on a plane and we head to Erie, Pennsylvania to find out why she killed Tommy Kellum.
And Brenda is ready to talk.
I put it in these watts in my right mind, sound mind and body. I put it in these watts in my right mind, sound mind and body. Are guilty of taking the life of Mr. Tommy Lee Kellum.
When investigators arrive in Pennsylvania to question Brenda Watson, she surprises them again.
She's wanting to tell us that she had killed Tommy Kellum and she wanted to read her statement.
Her demeanor was calm, soft-spoken, remorseful for what she'd done.
According to Brenda, the living situation with her ex-husband had reached a breaking point.
Tommy was seeing somebody else and not wanting to make a commitment to her. I think that this began to set Brenda off, get her to more jealous.
Brenda says after everything, she still loved Tommy. So on Friday, June 19th, she presented him with a solution to their problem.
She wanted to marry him again.
Tommy said no, he wouldn't marry me. That he would marry a dog before he would marry me. I told him that there was no need for him to talk to me that way.
Brenda says she stormed out of the house but couldn't bring herself to leave for good. So she came back later that night hoping to make up.
When she came in around 1 or 2, I believe, she said she was going to cook something to eat. He wouldn't allow her to cook anything.
He said that I was not cooking anything that night. Went to his room, locked the door, and pulled the breaker box switch. I lit 3 candles, begged and pleaded with him to turn on the lights, and he ignored me.
Brenda says she sat in the dark the rest of the night, replaying their entire relationship in her head.
She was tired of Tommy treating her like she was dirt, like she was a nobody.
I guess you could say she snapped.
I went to the gun rack and got the first gun I could feel. And I stopped, stood against the dinner table.
She waited for him to come out of his bedroom to go to the bathroom.
When he opened the door, I pushed the trigger.
She just fired rounds until the gun was empty.
tried my best to leave tough, but every time you come and get me. To the family, please forgive me for taking your loved ones. I am deeply sorry.
Brenda is charged with first-degree murder and stands trial in 2012.
She decided to waive a jury trial and do a bench trial. No jurors. The judge makes a ruling.
Brenda's attorneys attempt to lessen the impact of her confession by mounting a battered woman defense.
The defense lawyer said that it was self-defense. They wanted to paint a picture of my dad being this monster, but my dad wasn't no monster.
She never reported the violence, so it was kind of hard to establish.
Despite the lack of evidence, the argument seems to hold some sway with the judge.
The judge indicated that he didn't feel that there was enough indication for a first-degree murder charge, so she got second degree. She was sentenced to 30 years at Lowell Correction Facility.
When the judge, read the verdict, she looked at me. I looked at her. It was very intense. And I just basically told her, just for the sake of my own self, that I forgive her. I forgive her. But she's gonna get what she deserves now.
This was a senseless crime that shouldn't happen. Brenda should have found other places to go or other people to stay with. She wasn't under lock and key or being held against her will.
We lost my father. Brenda's children lost their mother. Their grandchildren lost their grandmother. Everybody took a loss here.
She may have killed him in the flesh, but the lessons that we were taught, how to love, being independent, working hard, that will never leave us.
For the veteran detectives who had poured years of their lives into the case, the outcome brought a profound sense of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the true measure of justice is often complex. They hoped that by bringing the truth to light, they had provided some small measure of peace to the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two gentle souls whose journey to find the American dream would always be remembered by the community they loved. In the heart of Texas, where the summers stretched long and golden across the prairie, the city of Arlington grew as a patchwork of dreams. Among the many who came to weave their own threads into this vast tapestry were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had left the quiet riverways and emerald fields of Vietnam in the year 2000, carrying with them little more than their hopes, their family, and an unwavering belief in the promise of a new land. To know Long was to know a man of quiet dignity. Even in his 70s, his hands remained steady, shaped by decades of honest labor. He possessed a gentle smile that could warm the coldest room, and his eyes held the wisdom of a survivor who had seen the world shift and change. Hong was his perfect counterpart. She was a woman of infinite grace, whose laughter was like the chime of wind bells on a breezy afternoon. Together, they represented the very essence of devotion, having walked hand in hand through the trials of immigration and the challenges of starting over in a foreign country. When they arrived in Texas, they did not seek an easy path. Instead, they established a commercial sewing business, a venture born from their shared skill and tireless work ethic. In the beginning, the hum of the sewing machines was a heartbeat of their household. They worked side by side, measuring fabrics, cutting patterns, and sewing garments with meticulous care. To help them navigate this new landscape, they enlisted their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was 38 years old, energetic, and spoke the best English in the family. He became the face of the business, interacting with contractors and managing the daily operations, while Long and Hong focused on the craftsmanship that defined their work. For nearly a decade, their dedication bore beautiful fruit. The sewing business flourished, and their household was filled with the happy noise of children and grandchildren. Their crowning achievement came when they secured a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, none other than Disney. It was a proud moment for the family, a validation of every sacrifice they had made. They felt they had truly captured their slice of the American dream. But as the years passed, the tides of fortune began to turn. By the year 2011, the sewing business encountered severe challenges. The vital contract with Disney was lost, and the steady stream of orders dwindled to a trickle. The gentle hum of the machines grew quiet, replaced by the heavy silence of financial worry. Long and Hong, deeply traditional in their ways, felt the weight of this decline. They had spent their lives protecting their family, and the prospect of failure was a shadow they could not easily shake. In their search for comfort and a way to restore their family's prosperity, they turned to the ancient beliefs of their homeland. For thousands of years, their ancestors had believed in spiritual forces, in the balance of energy, and in the protection of benevolent guardians. When a family faced overwhelming obstacles, it was customary to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to lift curses and invite good fortune back into home. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow Tran began searching for someone who could help them heal their business and their hearts. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, some 250 miles away. The woman, named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a rare ability to lift heavy curses and bring positive energy to those in need. Desperate for a solution, Chow contacted her and arranged a consultation at her home in Houston. It was a journey made of hope, a search for a guiding light in a season of darkness. But none of them could have foreseen that this quest for a spiritual savior would slowly lead them into a web of greed and tragedy. Chapter 2: The Gathering Shadow. The journey to Houston was filled with quiet anticipation. Chow Tran drove down the long highway, his mind occupied by the survival of the family business. Beside him, the memory of his mother-in-law's hopeful words offered comfort. When he met Daphne Wright, he found a woman of striking presence. She was 44 years old, confident, and carried herself with an authority that suggested deep knowledge of the spiritual realm. She spoke with certainty, assuring Chow that she could easily identify the source of their bad luck and dissolve it through ancient rituals. Daphne performed her ceremonies, burning incense and reciting prayers meant to realign the family's fortunes. For a brief moment, Chow felt a sense of relief. He returned to Arlington with renewed hope, sharing the details of the meeting with Long and Hong. The family wanted so desperately to believe that their troubles were temporary, that the dark cloud over their sewing shop would soon dissipate. Yet, as the months of 2011 rolled into 212, the business did not recover. Instead, the financial burden grew heavier. Rather than questioning the effectiveness of the rituals, Chow found himself drawn deeper into Daphne's influence. He believed that perhaps the curse was stronger than they had initially realized, requiring more intensive and far more expensive spiritual interventions. Daphne, recognizing the family's desperation, began to offer her services on credit. The cost of the ceremonies, the protective charms, and the rituals began to accumulate rapidly. What started as small offerings soon ballooned into an astronomical debt. Over the course of a single year, the amount the family allegedly owed Daphne grew to somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. It was a staggering sum, one that the struggling sewing business could never hope to repay. As the debt mounted, the atmosphere within the family changed. The light-hearted laughter that once filled Long and Hong's apartment was replaced by whispered conversations and anxious glances. The elderly couple who had always lived simply and honestly, felt trapped in a situation they did not fully understand. They had placed their trust in a spiritual guide, only to find themselves drowning in a financial abyss. Daphne's demeanor also shifted. The warm, comforting spiritual advisor began to reveal a cold and demanding nature. She wanted her money, and she was not a person who tolerated delay. She knew that Long and Hong possessed substantial life insurance policies, designed to secure the future of their children and grandchildren in the event of their passing. This knowledge sparked a dark and terrible ambition within her. If the family could not pay their debt in life, she would find a way to collect it through their deaths. Unbeknownst to the gentle elderly couple, a plan was being formed in the dark. Daphne reached out to an acquaintance named Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man who was struggling to survive after being laid off from his job. Desperate, hungry, and facing the prospect of homelessness, Bobby was highly vulnerable to temptation. Daphne offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington and commit an unspeakable act. To assist him, Bobby enlisted a 16-year-old nephew, Willie Guillory, a young man who felt he had no choice but to follow his uncle's lead. Chapter 3. The Fateful Morning. The morning of June 10th, 2012, began like any other Sunday in Arlington. The air was warm and still, the sun rising slowly over the quiet apartment complexes. But at 7:29 in the morning, the peace of the day was shattered when emergency dispatchers received a call from Chow Tran. His voice was laced with worry as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. Chow explained to the dispatcher that his teenage son had gone to the apartment to knock on the door, but there had been no answer. The family had gathered outside, growing increasingly anxious when they noticed that one of the windows was slightly open and things inside did not appear right. Too terrified to enter the residence themselves, they waited on the sidewalk, praying that their fears were groundless. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Department with 14 years of experience, was dispatched to the scene. When he arrived, he noticed a large group of family members standing outside. It was unusually early for a welfare check, and the palpable anxiety of the crowd immediately signaled to him that this was no routine call. Entering the apartment through the unlocked door, Officer Weller was immediately struck by the state of the home. The living room was in complete disarray, presenting all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and furniture was overturned. He called out into the quiet rooms, his voice echoing off the walls, but there was no response. He systematically searched the kitchen, the bathroom, and finally entered the bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty. Officer Weller felt a momentary sense of relief, thinking that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to escape the summer heat. He turned to leave the room, his flashlight beam sweeping across the walls. That was when he saw them. Near a small closet, there were faint hand smudges on the wall, as if someone had reached out for support in a moment of struggle. A chill ran down the officer's spine. Every instinct told him that opening that closet door would change everything, yet his duty compelled him forward. With a hesitant hand, he pulled open the closet door. The sight that met him was one of profound tragedy. Long and Hong were inside, their lives cruelly stolen from them. They had been bound with duct tape, their faces covered to prevent them from calling for help. It was a scene of immense violence, one that left even a veteran officer like Weller in a state of shock. He walked out of the bedroom, temporarily unable to speak or use his radio, paralyzed by the sheer weight of what he had witnessed. Once he regained his composure, he called for assistance, summoning a supervisor and the homicide unit. The peaceful Sunday had transformed into a search for answers, a quest to discover who could commit such a heartless act against two gentle elders who had never harmed a soul. Chapter 4. The Pursuit of Truth. The arrival of the Arlington homicide investigators brought a focused, determined energy to the scene. Detective Stewart, a seasoned investigator with 21 years in the department, took charge of the case. He stood in the apartment, surveying the chaos, his mind analyzing every detail. The physical evidence left behind was highly unusual. On the coffee table, a plate of crushed prescription pills lay undisturbed, alongside a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left in a prominent position. To the untrained eye, these items pointed directly to local gang activity. Arlington was home to several active gangs known for extortion and robbery, and the blue bandana was a color often associated with their members. However, Detective Stewart remained deeply skeptical. The crime scene felt too staged, the clues too conveniently displayed. Most gang robberies were quick and chaotic, rarely involving such a high level of personal, targeted violence. The extensive use of duct tape and the deliberate concealment of the bodies in the closet suggested an intention that went far beyond a simple burglary gone wrong. It felt personal. The investigators began the delicate process of interviewing the grieving family. Chow Tran, as a primary English speaker, became their main point of contact. He described the previous evening, explaining that the family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday. It had been a happy occasion, filled with laughter and love. The elderly couple had stayed until 10:30 in the evening, after which they were driven home by another family member. It was the last time they were seen alive. Chow painted a picture of a sweet, generous couple who had no enemies and lived quiet lives. He mentioned that while Vietnamese immigrants often kept cash at home due to a traditional distrust of banking institutions, his in-laws had very little money. The sewing business had been struggling, and they were facing difficult times. As the detectives continued their work, a phone call from an insurance company changed the trajectory of the investigation. The agent informed Detective Stewart that Long and Hong were covered by life insurance policies, totaling $1 million. When the detective asked who the beneficiaries were, the answer was clear. Chow Tran was among them. This revelation introduced a complex financial motive. On June 13, 2012, the detectives invited Chow to the police station for a follow-up interview. Chow was cooperative, explaining that the insurance policies were established to ensure the survival of the family, business in the event of a tragedy. He provided a detailed timeline of his whereabouts on the night of the murders, explaining that he and other family members had played cards until after 10 o'clock. His alibi was insistent, and without direct evidence, the police could not name him as a suspect. Meanwhile, the forensic laboratory processed the evidence from the apartment. They gathered deoxyribonucleic acid profiles from the marijuana cigarette and examined the duct tape for fingerprints. When the results returned, the investigators faced a major setback. The deoxyribonucleic acid did not match Chow, any family member, or any profile within a combined DNA index system database. With no immediate matches and no new leads, the momentum of the investigation began to slow. The detectives had interviewed over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and community members, but the killer remained in the shadows. Months turned into years, and the case of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu slowly went cold. Yet, the memory of the gentle couple remained a quiet flame, keeping the promise of justice alive in the hearts of the detectives. Chapter 5, The Catalyst. For 3 long years, the file containing the details of the Arlington tragedy sat on a shelf, quiet but never forgotten. The year was now 2015, and the world had moved on. But in the grand design of justice, the smallest events can sometimes set the largest wheels in motion. In the city of Houston, a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse. In the state of Texas, horse theft is a serious felony. Because Willie had reached the age of adulthood and was now being charged with a felony, the law required his biological profile to be entered into the national database. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old with no prior felony convictions, which was why his profile had never appeared in the system. When his deoxyribonucleic acid was uploaded, the digital systems of the law performed a silent comparison. Within seconds, a match was found. The deoxyribonucleic acid on the partially smoked marijuana cigarette recovered from the Arlington crime scene belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, Arlington detectives traveled to locate Willie. They arrested him for a parole violation to avoid alerting him to the true nature of their interest. In the interrogation room, Willie initially denied any involvement, claiming he had never been anywhere near Arlington. But when Detective Stewart laid out the scientific reality of the biological evidence, the young man's defenses crumbled. He began to weep, the heavy burden of a secret finally breaking his resolve. He confessed to being in the apartment, but he insisted he had not acted alone. He pointed the finger at his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie recounted the events of June 9, 2012. His uncle had approached him, asking for help with a job in Arlington. Having grown up in a difficult environment, Willie felt he had no choice but to accompany his uncle. When they arrived, Bobby used a physical key to enter the apartment, intending to stage a robbery before the couple returned. They scattered belongings, left the pills, the beer bottle, and the blue bandana to make it look like the work of local gang members. Willie admitted to smoking the marijuana cigarette, unaware that this small act would eventually lead the police to their door. When Long and Hong returned home, the situation quickly escalated into violence. Bobby attacked the elderly man, while Willie attempted to prevent Hong from escaping. After the struggle ended, they used duct tape to secure the couple and move them into the closet before fleeing back to Houston. When asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie revealed the name of the person who had orchestrated the entire plot, Daphne Wright. He explained that Daphne was a friend of his uncle's and had claimed that the couple owed her a substantial amount of money. She had told Bobby that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead, promising him $10,000 for the deed. With this explosive confession, the puzzle began to fall into place. The detectives now knew that the tragedy was not a random act of street violence, but a calculated, cold-hearted plan born of greed and manipulation. Chapter 6, Unveiling the Mastermind. The focus of the investigation now turned to Bobby Guillory. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, where they arrested the 52-year-old man on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially, Bobby remained silent, refusing to cooperate. But when faced with a search warrant for his own biological profile and the realization that his nephew had already confessed, his resolve dissolved. He broke down, weeping in the interrogation room, expressing fear and regret for his actions. He had no prior criminal history and had never been in trouble with the law before this tragic event. Bobby confirmed Willie's story, placing the blame entirely on Daphne Wright. He explained that he had been in a state of extreme financial desperation, having lost his job and facing the threat of life on the streets. Daphne had recognized his vulnerability and used it to her advantage, offering him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bobby, Daphne operated as a spiritual loan shark. Chow Tran and Hong Lu had become deeply indebted to her as they tried to save their failing business. When they could no longer pay, Daphne realized she could collect her money through the life insurance policies. Bobby made a startling revelation during his confession. He claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. This accusation of ultimate betrayal shocked the investigators. Chow, whom they had supported and interviewed multiple times, was now implicated as a key participant in the conspiracy. On August 31, 2016, detectives traveled to Houston to confront Daphne Wright. They found a woman who was the undisputed leader of her household, married with 3 daughters. When questioned about Chow, She confirmed he was a client, but refused to discuss their financial arrangements. Her attitude was cold and dismissive, showing no remorse or willingness to assist the police. Armed with an arrest warrant, the detectives returned to her home, placing her under arrest and conducting a thorough search of the residence. Inside, they discovered detailed ledgers that documented her business transactions. The books revealed that she regularly charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services, removing any doubt about the massive financial scale of her operations. Daphne's husband, Howard, was fully cooperative with the police, maintaining that he had no knowledge of his wife's dark activities. He expressed genuine shock, having believed his wife was simply offering peaceful spiritual guidance to those in need. Daphne, however, refused to speak, demanding the presence of her attorney and maintaining a stoic silence. Chapter 7. The Scales of Justice. The final piece of the complex narrative emerged when prosecutors subpoenaed Chow Tran's financial records in 2015. They discovered that following the tragic deaths of his in-laws, Chow had not reopened the sewing business. Instead, he had purchased a comfortable new home with the proceeds of the life insurance policies. Faced with the mounting evidence against him, Chow refused to speak to the police without his attorney, recognizing that they needed his testimony to secure a conviction against the mastermind. Daphne Wright, the prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full cooperation and truthful testimony at trial. It was a compromise often required in the pursuit of justice, a choice to hold the primary instigator accountable. During his deposition, Chow presented a narrative of psychological control. He claimed that he and his mother-in-law had been utterly terrified of Daphne's alleged spiritual powers, believing she could place a devastating curse on their family if they did not pay. He even claimed that Hong Lu, in an act of ultimate self-sacrifice, had suggested her own death so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy the debt. Investigators found this claim to be highly unbelievable, viewing it as an attempt to lessen his own guilt. Daphne's trial began on August 26, 2019. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a relentless, greedy woman who manipulated his family and demanded their lives for money. The defense countered by pointing out that there was no physical documentation of the vast debt and suggested that Chow had orchestrated the crime entirely for his own financial gain, pocketing the $850,000 of insurance money. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury listened closely to the accumulation of evidence, including the confessions of Bobby and Willie and the physical ledgers found in Daphne's home. In September 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and received the ultimate penalty of life in prison, without the possibility of parole, while Bobby and Willie also faced the consequences of their actions. The resolution of the case left a lingering sense of incompletion for the detectives. Chow Tran remained free, shielded by his immunity agreement. Yet, as the community looked back on the lives of Long Nguyen and Hong Le, they chose to remember the warmth, the dedication, and the beautiful dreams they had brought from Vietnam. The story of their journey was a reminder of the strength of love, the dangers of blind trust, and the enduring pursuit of truth that eventually brought the shadows into the light. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, usually brings with it a warm, golden promise, the kind of light that stretches across the wide concrete avenues and bathes the suburban neighborhoods in a quiet, domestic peace. In the early years of the new millennium, this corner of Tarrant County had become a sanctuary for families seeking a fresh start, a place where different cultures woven together created a vibrant, colorful tapestry of shared hopes. Among those who had traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean to build a new life were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Le. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, bringing with them not only their 3 children, but also a deep treasury of time-honored traditions, an unwavering work ethic, and a love that had weathered decades of change. Long was a man of quiet dignity, whose face bore the gentle lines of a lifetime of hard work and laughter, while Hong was the warm, beating heart of their household, a woman whose culinary skills and nurturing presence made their home a central gathering place for the local Vietnamese community. Together, they represented the resilient spirit of the post-1975 immigrant generation, those who had left behind the familiar landscapes of their homeland to cultivate a legacy for their children and grandchildren in a land of unfamiliar customs and languages. For more than a decade, they poured their energy into building a commercial sewing business, a venture that began as a modest operation in their garage, but quickly grew into a thriving enterprise. To navigate the complexities of American business transactions, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who possessed a strong command of the English language. Chow was the public face of the business, the one who negotiated contracts, shook hands with suppliers, and acted as the bridge between the traditional world of his in-laws and the fast-paced commercial environment of Texas. By the late 90s and early 2000s, the family reached the pinnacle of their entrepreneurial journey when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, a commercial giant whose name was recognized by children and families across the world. For a time, it seemed that their version of the American dream had been fully realized. Their home was filled with the sounds of their grandchildren playing, the hum of sewing machines, and the comforting aroma of traditional Vietnamese broth simmering on the stove. Yet, as is often the case with the unpredictable tides of commerce, this period of abundance was not to last. By the year 2011, the sewing business suffered a devastating blow when the massive contract was discontinued. Almost overnight, the steady flow of orders dwindled to a trickle, and the family found themselves facing severe financial distress. The machines that had once hummed with productive energy fell silent, and a heavy cloud of anxiety settled over the household. Long and Hong, deeply rooted in the traditional spiritual practices of their ancestors, believed that the sudden string of misfortune was not merely a consequence of shifting market dynamics, but rather the result of a spiritual imbalance, a curse that had settled upon their endeavors. In many East Asian traditions, when a family encounters a series of insurmountable obstacles, such as impending bankruptcy, severe health crises, or marital discord, it is common to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. These advisors are believed to possess the unique ability to communicate with the spiritual realm, perform cleansing rituals, and invite the protective blessings of the lucky deities and the gods of wealth, desperate to find a solution and restore harmony to their family. Hong and Chow began searching through the local Vietnamese language newspapers, hoping to find someone who could help them lift the perceived curse. Their search led them to an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, approximately 250 miles to the south. The woman, who went by the name of Daphne Wright, advertised a wide range of metaphysical services, claiming she could remove malevolent curses, bestow powerful blessings of good fortune, and help struggling businesses regain their prosperity. For a family standing on the precipice of financial ruin, Daphne's promises shone like a beacon of hope. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow made the drive to Houston to consult with the spiritual practitioner, embarking on a path that would ultimately lead the family into a dark web of manipulation and greed. At first, the rituals seemed to offer a sense of comfort. Daphne performed ceremonies intended to cleanse the family's business of negative energy, and for a brief period, Long and Hong felt a renewed sense of optimism. They believed that their spiritual savior would guide them back to the prosperous path they had worked so hard to establish. However, as the months passed, the promised financial recovery failed to materialize. Instead of advising the family to adjust their business strategies, Daphne maintained that the curse was exceptionally stubborn, requiring increasingly elaborate and expensive rituals to dismantle. deeply ensnared by their beliefs and terrified of the spiritual consequences of stopping the ceremonies. The family continued to pour their remaining resources into Daphne's services. Because they did not have the cash readily available, Daphne began extending them credit, allowing the debt to accumulate. Over the course of a year, the financial obligation ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. What had begun as a quest for spiritual healing had transformed into a crushing financial prison, with Daphne acting as a spiritual loan shark who demanded absolute compliance and prompt payment. The tension reached a devastating climax on the morning of June 10th, 2012. At 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers in Arlington received a frantic call from Chow Tran. He explained that he and his family had been trying to contact his elderly in-laws, 70-something Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, but had received no response. Worried by the silence, Chow had sent his teenage son to knock on the apartment door, but the knock went unanswered. The family gathered outside the residence, their concern deepening when they noticed that one of the apartment windows was unusually open. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, but too frightened to enter the home themselves, they waited anxiously on the sidewalk for the police to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Force, was the first to respond to the welfare check. As she pulled up to the apartment complex, she immediately sensed that this was not a routine call. It was exceptionally early in the morning for a welfare check, and the sight of an entire multi-generational family standing outside in a state of visible distress suggested a situation of gravity. Officer Weller entered the apartment, calling out the names of the elderly couple, but her voice echoed through quiet rooms without response. The interior of the home was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers had been pulled open, personal belongings were scattered across the floor, and a collection of compact discs had been ransacked. As Officer Weller searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, she found no sign of the occupants. She proceeded to the master bedroom, shining her flashlight into the darkened corners. Initially, she saw nothing out of the ordinary that would suggest the couple was still inside, and she began to hope that perhaps they had simply gone for an early morning walk to enjoy the cool air before the Texas heat set in. However, as she turned to leave the bedroom, her flashlight caught a series of faint hand smudges on the wall adjacent to a remarkably small closet. A sudden, instinctual hesitation washed over her, an internal voice warning her the tragedy that lay beyond the thin wooden door. Recognizing her duty to leave no stone unturned, she reached out and pulled the closet door open. Inside the cramped space lay the bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. They had been bound hand and foot, hogtied with heavy silver duct tape. Their heads and mouths were completely enveloped in layers of the thick adhesive, and the small closet was stained with the unmistakable signs of a violent struggle. Officer Weller, despite her 14 years of experience on the force, was struck with a profound sense of shock. The sheer brutality of the scene left her momentarily unable to speak or even use her radio to call. For assistance, she stepped back into the living room, gathering her composure in the quiet space, before finally contacting her supervisor and requesting the dispatch of the crime scene unit and the homicide investigators. When Detective Stewart and the veteran homicide team arrived, they were met with a crime scene that was both heartbreaking and perplexing. The physical evidence suggested that the elderly couple had been confronted the moment they stepped through their front door. There were traces of blood on the entryway carpet, on the couch, on the coffee table, and along the walls leading toward the back bedroom, indicating that they had desperately tried to cling to the walls as they were being forced into the rear of the apartment. On the coffee table, investigators found a plate containing crushed prescription pills, prepared in a manner that suggested recreational consumption, alongside a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a glass beer bottle, left in a prominent position as if it were a deliberate calling card. To the initial observer, these items strongly pointed to the involvement of local street gangs, some of whom were known to operate in the region and occasionally extort local business owners. Yet, as the seasoned investigators began to analyze the scene, a sense of skepticism began to take root. The presentation of the gang markers seemed almost too perfect, too stage-managed to be the work of impulsive street criminals. While street gangs certainly engage in robberies, the extreme level of personalized violence inflicted upon an elderly couple who had no known enemies or illicit association seemed inconsistent with a simple robbery gone wrong. The detectives began to hypothesize that the crime scene had been deliberately staged to mislead the police and divert attention away from the true perpetrators. The following day, detectives attended the autopsies of the victims at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The medical examiner confirmed that both Long and Hong had suffered significant blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted with an instrument resembling a hammer or a small bat. However, the physical trauma was not the primary cause of their deaths. The autopsy revealed a far more agonizing reality. Hong's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape, and Long's face had been bound with 10 feet of the same material. They had died of suffocation. The revelation of this slow, painful end deepened the determination of the detectives to bring those responsible to justice. As the team returned to the police station to coordinate their next steps, Detective Stewart received an unexpected telephone call from a life insurance company. The representative informed the detective that the deceased couple was covered under a highly substantial life insurance policy valued at approximately $1 million. When Detective Stewart inquired about the designated beneficiaries of this policy, the answer sent the investigation in an entirely new direction. One of the primary beneficiaries was their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Hoping to clarify this financial development, investigators invited Chow to the police station for a follow-up interview on June 13th, 2012. Chow cooperated fully, presenting himself as a grieving relative eager to assist the police. When questioned about the insurance policy, he explained that because the sewing business was registered in his in-laws' names, the family had established a policy to ensure the business could continue to support the extended family in the event of tragedy. He also provided a detailed, consistent timeline of his activities on the night of the murders, explaining that the entire family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday, playing cards and sharing a meal until past 10 o'clock in the evening. Chow's alibi was supported by other family members, and the detectives found no immediate physical evidence to connect him to the physical acts of violence. To ensure a thorough investigation, the crime scene technicians processed the biological evidence collected from the apartment, including the forensic profiles from the marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. The resulting deoxyribonucleic acid profile was submitted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's combined DNA index system, but the search yielded no matches. Because the database primarily contains profiles of individuals with prior felony convictions, the lack of a match suggested that the person who left the cigarette might have been a minor or someone who had never been arrested for a serious offense. With no viable leads, no matching fingerprints, and an entire family possessing consistent alibis, the investigation slowly ground to a halt. For more than 2 years, the file sat on the detectives' desks, a somber reminder of an unsolved tragedy. The breakthrough came unexpectedly in October the year 2015, more than 3 years after the fateful night in Arlington. The police department received notification that a newly entered deoxyribonucleic acid profile in the national database had produced a perfect match to the biological material recovered from the marijuana cigarette. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse in Houston. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not been present in the database during the initial investigation. Now an adult with a felony record, His identity was finally revealed to the law enforcement community. On October 17, 2015, investigators located Willie Guillory and brought him in for questioning. Initially, Willie denied any knowledge of the events in Arlington, claiming he had never visited the city and suggesting that perhaps his biological material had been somehow transferred without his knowledge. However, when the detectives presented him with the undeniable scientific accuracy of the deoxyribonucleic acid match, the young man's defenses crumbled. He broke down in tears and confessed to his role in the crime, insisting that he had not acted alone. Willie explained that in the summer of 2012, he had been living under the care of his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his uncle had instructed him to join him on a trip to Arlington to assist with a task, promising that they would be compensated for their help. On June 9, 2012, the uncle and nephew made the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington. Willie claimed that Bobby had been provided with a key to the elderly couple's apartment, allowing them to enter the residence without forcing the lock. Once inside, Bobby instructed Willie to scatter items around the living room, open drawers, and leave the gang-related items, including the blue bandana, the crushed pills, and the beer bottle, to create the illusion of a street gang robbery. During this process, Willie had smoked a portion of a marijuana cigarette, inadvertently leaving behind the crucial piece of evidence that would eventually identify him. When Long and Hong returned home, the situation turned violent. Bobby confronted the couple, using a blunt object to incapacitate them, while Willie assisted in preventing their escape. Together, they bound the victims with duct tape, moved them into the small bedroom closet, and returned to Houston. When asked why they had targeted an elderly couple they did not even know, Willie revealed that the entire operation had been organized and funded by a prominent acquaintance of his uncle, a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright. Willie stated that he had witnessed his uncle meeting with Daphne in her office, where she complained about clients who owed her a substantial amount of money, and declared that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead. Armed with this critical confession, the investigators secured arrest warrants for Bobby Guillory. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, where they apprehended Bobby on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the reality of his arrest and the confession of his nephew, Bobby also chose to cooperate, confirming that Daphne Wright had orchestrated the entire plot. He explained that in 2011, he had been struggling with severe financial difficulties after being laid off from his job. Daphne, aware of his desperation, had offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington and carry out the deed. Bobby painted a portrait of Daphne as an incredibly calculating individual who operated her spiritual practice with the ruthless efficiency of an organized enterprise. According to Bobby, Chow Tran and Hong Lee had accumulated a massive debt to Daphne for her services, and when they were unable to pay, Daphne proposed a solution centered on the couple's life insurance policies. She suggested that by removing the elderly couple, Chow and his wife would receive a significant financial windfall, which would then be used to settle the outstanding spiritual debt. Most shockingly, Bobby claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. In August of the year 2016, detectives executed a search warrant at Daphne Wright's Houston residence and placed her under arrest inside her home. Investigators discovered detailed ledger books documenting her extensive business transactions. The records revealed that she had been charging clients tens of thousands of dollars for various spiritual services, confirming the immense financial scale of her operations. While Daphne maintained her innocence and refused to provide statements without her attorney, the combined testimonies of Willie and Bobby Guillory, along with the financial ledgers and the scientific evidence, provided a powerful foundation for the prosecution. To secure a conviction against the primary organizer of the crime, prosecutors made the difficult decision to offer Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his complete and honest testimony. Chow agreed to the arrangement, and during Daphne's trial in August of the year 2019, he took the stand to describe the immense psychological control she had exerted over his family. He portrayed her as an imposing, greedy figure who used their deeply held traditional beliefs to manipulate them, ultimately demanding their compliance under the threat of spiritual and physical ruin. The defense team vigorously challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he had used a spiritual advisor as a scapegoat to secure the life insurance proceeds for himself without facing legal consequences. However, after hearing all the evidence, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a definitive end to her manipulative reign. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the legal consequences of their actions, ensuring that those who had participated in the tragedy were held accountable. While the legal proceedings left some questions unanswered and brought a mixture of emotions to the surviving family members, the resolution of the case stands as a testament to the dedication of the investigators who refused to let the memory of Long, Nguyen, and Hong Lee fade into obscurity. The story of their journey, their devotion to their family, and the ultimate triumph of justice serves as a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring importance of community, truth, and the protective embrace of the law. The sun always seemed to rise with gentle, golden promise over flat, sprawling landscapes of north-central Texas. In the city of Arlington, a place where the hum of modern industry met the quiet warmth of tight-knit neighborhoods. The mornings were usually filled with the comforting sounds of early traffic, the chirping of birds in the oak trees, and the smell of fresh coffee brewing in suburban kitchens. It was a city of diverse faces, a tapestry of cultures woven together by families who had traveled from all corners of the world to find their own piece of the American dream. Among these families were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, leaving behind the familiar, bustling streets of their homeland in Vietnam. For decades, they had known the rhythm of a different life, one shaped by ancient traditions, close community ties, and the quiet resilience that comes from surviving times of great change. When they made the decision to pack up their lives and move to Texas with their 3 children, they were not looking for grand fortunes. Instead, they sought a peaceful sanctuary where their children and grandchildren could grow, learn, and thrive under the wide, open skies of a new land. In Arlington, they found a thriving Vietnamese community, a place where the old ways and the new world lived in a beautiful, harmonious balance. The first major wave of immigrants had arrived in the area after the year 1975, and over the decades, they had built a vibrant network of businesses, temples, and neighborhoods. Long and Hong studied the area carefully. They saw a place of opportunity, a welcoming city where hard work was rewarded and where they could establish a legacy. With determination and a shared work ethic, the elderly couple started a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, run out of a small workspace filled with the rhythmic hum of sewing machines, the colorful mounds of fabrics, and the soft chatter of family members working side by side. To help manage the business, they enlisted the support of their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was young, energetic, and spoke the best English in the family, making him the natural public face of the enterprise. He handled the contracts, spoke with the suppliers, and navigated the complex world of American business regulations, while Long and Hong focused on the craft they knew best, ensuring every garment was stitched with perfection. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore fruit. The business expanded, and their reputation for quality craftsmanship grew. The pinnacle of their success came when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, producing clothing that would bear the iconic designs of Disney. It was a proud moment for the family, a validation of all the sacrifices they had made when crossing the ocean. They were living the dream they had envisioned, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the respect of their peers. But life, like the Texas weather, can be unpredictable. By the year 2011, the economic tides began to turn. The coveted contract with the entertainment giant was lost, and almost overnight, the steady flow of orders dwindled to a trickle. The sewing machines grew quiet, and the heavy silence of financial anxieties settled over the family. The bills began to accumulate, and the pressure of maintaining the business started to take a heavy toll on everyone, especially on Hong and her son-in-law, Chow. In moments of deep distress, people often look to their roots for guidance and comfort. For generations, their ancestors have believed in the spiritual forces that govern luck, prosperity, and protection. In the traditional culture of their homeland, when a household faced a sudden string of bad luck or impending ruin, it was common to believe that a spiritual imbalance or even a curse was at play. To remedy this, families would seek the counsel of a spiritual advisor, a person believed to possess the rare ability to communicate with the unseen world, perform ancient rituals, and lift a heavy hand of misfortune. Anxious to save the family business and find a way out of the darkening financial shadow, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law began searching to the local Vietnamese newspapers, looking for someone who could offer a spiritual solution. It was there, among the advertisements of local merchants and community services, that they found a notice for a spiritual advisor located in Houston. Some 250 miles away, the woman advertised herself as a powerful healer, someone who could remove the most stubborn of bad curses, bestow good fortune, and restore peace to troubled households. With a heart full of hope, Chow reached out to the advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright. She agreed to meet him at her home in Houston for a consultation. The family believed that this meeting would be the turning point, the moment their luck would finally change and the sewing machines would hum with busy productivity. Once again, Daphne performed her rituals, burning incense and reciting prayers designed to ward off the negative energies that had plagued the business. For a brief period, Chow and Hong felt a sense of relief, confident that their spiritual savior would guide them back to prosperity. Yet, behind the facade of spiritual healing, a much darker reality was beginning to unfold. The rituals were not free, and Daphne Wright was not a simple, benevolent healer. As the months passed and the business failed to recover, Daphne began to charge exorbitant fees for her services. She ran her operations on a system of spiritual credit, convincing the desperate family that more complex, intensive rituals were required to fully break the curse. The debt grew rapidly, ballooning to a staggering sum between $250,000 and $280,000. The family was trapped in a cycle of desperation, pouring what little money they had left into the rituals. Terrified of what might happen if they stopped, Daphne was a master of psychological control, making it clear that those who failed to pay her would face dire spiritual consequences. The pressure was building to a breaking point, setting the stage for a tragedy that would shock the entire city of Arlington. On the morning of the 10th of June, the year 2012, the quiet of the early hours was broken when emergency dispatchers received a call at 7:29. The caller was Chow Tran, his voice trembling with anxiety as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. He explained that his teenage son had gone to knock on their apartment door, but there had been no answer. The family had gathered outside, growing increasingly worried when they noticed that one of the apartment windows was open and things inside did not look right. When the responding police officers arrived at the apartment complex, they found the family waiting outside, too terrified to enter the home themselves. Officer Weller, a veteran officer with 14 years of experience, was the first to step through the front door. The interior of the apartment was in complete disarray, bearing all the hallmarks of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, belongings were scattered across the floor, and a heavy, unsettling silence hung in the air. Officer Weller moved cautiously through the rooms, calling out for Long and Hong, but there was no response. After checking the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, he entered the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty. He turned to leave, but as his flashlight swept across the wall, he noticed dark hand smudges next to a small closet door. A sense of apprehension washed over him, a deep instinct telling him that something terrible lay behind that door. Taking a deep breath, Officer Weller opened the closet. Inside, he made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were inside the small space, their bodies bound tightly with duct tape. Their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped, and there was no sign of life. In that silent, tragic moment, the officer knew that their journey to find the American dream had ended in an unspeakable nightmare. The news of the double homicide sent shockwaves through the Arlington Police Department. Homicide investigators, including seasoned detectives with over 2 decades of experience, arrived to process the scene. It was a highly violent and chaotic environment. The physical evidence suggested that an attack had occurred the moment the elderly couple had walked through their front door, with signs of a struggle near the entrance on the carpet and against the furniture. As the forensic teams began their meticulous work, they uncovered several items that seemed designed to paint a specific picture. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills, and nearby was a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped carefully around a beer bottle left in plain sight. To the investigators, this bandana looked almost like a calling card, pointing directly toward the active street gangs known to operate in the region. However, the detectives remained skeptical. In their years of investigating major crimes, they had learned that when a crime scene appears too perfect, too staged, it often means the perpetrator is trying to direct attention away from the truth. The level of violence and the specific nature of the crime felt deeply personal, far exceeding the typical patterns of a standard robbery. They collected every piece of potential evidence, including the marijuana cigarette, hair fibers, and swabs of the duct tape, hoping that science would eventually provide the answers. In the days following the tragedy, the detectives focused on interviewing the family members to understand who might have wanted to harm the gentle, hard-working couple. Chow Tran served as the primary spokesperson, cooperating fully and providing an airtight alibi for himself and the rest of the family. He explained that on the night of the incident, they had all been celebrating Long's birthday at a family gathering, playing cards until late in the evening before the elderly couple was driven home by another relative. As the investigation progressed, detectives received a routine call from an insurance company that instantly shifted the direction of their inquiries. It revealed that Long and Hong had been covered by substantial life insurance policies, totaling at least $1 million, with Chow Tran named as one of the primary beneficiaries. When questioned about this, Chow explained that the policies were intended to ensure the survival of the family business in the event of a tragedy, but the revelation added a complex layer of financial motive to the case. Despite their best efforts, the initial leads began to dry up. The DNA extracted from a marijuana cigarette did not match any of the family members, nor did it return a match in the national database, suggesting the contributor might be someone without a prior felony record, perhaps even a minor. For more than 2 years, the files remained on the detectives' desks, the trail growing colder with each passing month, until a surprising turn of events in the year 2015 brought the case back to life. In the autumn of 2015, the database returned a positive match for the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse in Houston. Because Willie had been only 16 years old at the time of the murders in 2012 with no prior record, his DNA had not been in the system. His recent conviction as an adult had finally connected him to the crime scene in Arlington. Detectives wasted no time in bringing Willie in for questioning. When presented with the scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down and confessed, revealing that he had not acted alone. He had been accompanied by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 49-year-old man who had been struggling financially after being laid off from his job. Bobby was arrested shortly thereafter at his home in Katy, Texas. Faced with the gravity of the charges, Bobby also confessed, detailing how they had been hired to commit the crime by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. Bobby explained that Daphne was determined to collect the money she believed she was owed, and she had devised a plan to eliminate the couple so that the insurance policies could be cashed in to settle the massive spiritual debt. The revelation of this intricate, tragic plot culminated in a series of trials in the year 2019. The prosecution presented a powerful case, detailing the manipulation, the financial desperation, and the tragic consequences of a trust misplaced in the supernatural. Daphne Wright was ultimately convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that justice was served for the gentle couple who had traveled so far in search of a peaceful life. The legacy of Long, Nguyen, and Hong Lu remained one of love, dedication, and the enduring strength of family. Though their lives were cut short, the memory of their warmth, their hard work, and the sacrifices they made to build a better future for their children continued to inspire those who knew them, a testament to the quiet dignity of the human spirit in the face of life's greatest challenges. The morning of June 10, 2012, began with a heavy, unyielding silence over the city of Arlington, Texas, in the quiet residential neighborhoods. The early summer heat was already beginning to rise from the asphalt, promising a sweltering day. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, a phone rang in the emergency dispatch center, shattering the routine calm of the early shift. The caller was a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant named Chow Tran. His voice, trembling with anxiety he could barely contain, came through the line asking for a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. He struggled to find the words, spelling out the names for the dispatcher. His father-in-law was Long Nguyen, a man in his early 70s, and his mother-in-law was Hong Lu. Chow explained to the dispatcher that his wife and his teenage son had gone to the apartment to check on them, only to find a window wide open and things inside looking completely out of place. Too terrified to step across the threshold into the unknown, the family huddled outside, waiting desperately for the arrival of the police. When the responding officers arrived at the suburban apartment complex, they immediately sensed that this was no ordinary welfare check. It was rare to receive such requests so early in the morning, and seeing an entire family standing outside, visibly shaken and refusing to enter their own relative's home, set off silent alarms in the minds of the patrolmen. Officer Weller was one of the first to step inside the apartment. The front door gave way to a scene of quiet chaos. The living room was in complete disarray, showing all the classic, disturbing signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, personal belongings were scattered across the floor, and compact discs were strewn about. Officer Weller called out, his voice echoing off the walls, but only silence answered him. He checked the kitchen, the dining area, and the bathroom, finding them completely empty. The only remaining space was the master bedroom. Officer Weller stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the dimness. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty of people, though the air felt heavy and thick. Convinced that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk to escape the summer heat, Weller turned to leave. But as he turned his flashlight toward the door, something caught his eye. Near a very small closet in the corner of the room, there were distinct, dark hand smudges on the wall. It looked as though someone had desperately clung to the drywall, fighting to hold their ground. A cold instinct, honed by years of service, told Weller that he had to open that closet door. He hesitated for a single, fleeting second, praying that his instincts were wrong. Then he reached out and pulled the door open. Inside the cramped space of the closet lay Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were bound hand and foot with heavy gray duct tape. their heads and mouths covered in layers of the same thick adhesive. The violence of the scene was overwhelming. Weller, despite his 14 years of experience in law enforcement, felt a wave of profound shock wash over him. He walked out of the bedroom into the middle of the living room, completely unable to speak or even use his radio for several long moments. When he finally found his voice, he called for backup, a supervisor, and the crime scene unit. The seasoned homicide detectives who arrived soon after, including investigators with over 21 years on the force, were equally shaken. It was clear that the gentle elderly couple had been subjected to an unspeakable act of violence, beaten with a blunt object that left terrible marks upon their foreheads. Yet, as the medical examiner would later reveal, it was not the blunt force trauma that took their lives. In an act of pure, chilling cruelty, the attackers had wrapped 25 feet of duct tape around Hong Lee's face and 10 feet around Long Wen's face, leaving them to suffocate slowly in the dark. It was a deeply personal, targeted crime, far too brutal to be a simple robbery gone wrong. To the detectives, however, some of the evidence left behind seemed almost too convenient. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills, alongside a half-smoked marijuana cigarette. More strikingly, a light blue bandana was carefully wrapped around a beer bottle, left in plain sight like a calling card. To an outsider, these clues pointed directly to the active Vietnamese youth gangs known to operate in the region, groups that sometimes extorted local businesses. But experienced detectives knew that real gang members rarely left their signature colors so neatly, arranged at the scene of a capital crime. It felt staged, an elaborate theatrical production designed to lead the police down a false path. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, seeking to build a stable, prosperous life for their 3 children and grandchildren. They were a beloved, gentle couple who had established a commercial sewing business in Arlington, Texas, a city known for its vibrant and hard-working Vietnamese community. To bridge the language barrier, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who spoke fluent English and became the public face of the business, coordinating with major commercial clients. For nearly a decade, the family thrived, even securing a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant. But by the year 2011, their good fortune began to slip away. The contract was lost, revenues plummeted, and the business was pushed to the brink of bankruptcy. Desperate to save their livelihood and protect their family legacy, the elderly couple turned to the deep-rooted spiritual traditions of their homeland. In Vietnamese culture, many believe in seeking the guidance of spiritual advisors or mystics during times of severe crisis, such as financial ruin or legal trouble, to lift perceived curses and restore harmony. Searching through a local Vietnamese language newspaper, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, advertised extraordinary spiritual powers, claiming she could both place and remove powerful curses, believing she was the key to restoring their prosperity. Chow made the long drive to Houston for a consultation. Daphne performed elaborate rituals, filling the family with renewed hope. Yet, instead of bringing good fortune, this connection dragged the family into a deep, inescapable dark hole. Over the course of a single year, Daphne Wright began running services for the family on credit. She claimed that the curses on their business were exceptionally stubborn, requiring increasingly complex and expensive rituals. The debt ballooned rapidly, reaching an astronomical sum of between $250,000 and $280,000. The family, already struggling to survive, had absolutely no way to pay. As detectives dug deeper into the family's financial affairs following the murders, they made a startling discovery. The elderly couple held substantial life insurance policies, totaling at least $850,000, with the primary beneficiary being none other than their son-in-law, Chow Tran. When questioned about this, Chow was highly cooperative, explaining that the policies were intended to ensure the survival of the family's sewing business in the event of a tragedy. He provided a seamless, airtight alibi for himself and the rest of the family for the night of the murders, explaining they had been celebrating Long's birthday and playing cards until late in the evening. With no matching DNA or fingerprints in the national databases, the case slowly went cold. For over 2 years, investigators worked tirelessly but found no active leads, leaving the family and the community in a state of unresolved grief. The breakthrough finally came in the year 2015, triggered by an entirely unrelated and almost absurd crime. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse in Houston, a felony offense in the state of Texas. Because Willie had been a minor of 16 years at the time of the murders in 2012, his DNA had never been entered into the national database. But now, as an adult with a felony conviction, his genetic profile was uploaded, triggering an immediate, exact match with the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene. When brought in for questioning, Willie quickly broke down under the weight of evidence. He confessed that he had not acted alone. He had been recruited by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man with no prior criminal record, who was desperately struggling to make ends meet after being laid off from his job. Bobby, in turn, confessed that they had been hired to commit the crime by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor. Daphne had promised Bobby $10,000 to carry out the hit, driven by a cold, relentless greed to collect the massive debt she was owed. In a shocking twist, Bobby revealed to investigators that Daphne had obtained the keys to the elderly couple's apartment directly from Chow Tran. According to the plot, the murders were designed to look like a gang robbery, allowing Chow and his wife to collect a massive life insurance payout and finally settle their debts with the spiritual mystic. Chow later claimed to investigators that his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, had willingly offered her own life as a sacrifice to save the family from Daphne's spiritual wrath. A claim the detectives found completely absurd and offensive. To secure a conviction against the true mastermind of the operation, prosecutors made a difficult choice. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, detailed testimony against Daphne Wright, Bobby Guillory, and Willie Guillory. In August of 2019, the case finally went to trial. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a manipulative, greedy puppet master who used psychological terror and ancient superstitions to control his mind and dictate his family's actions. The defense argued fiercely that Chow was a true instigator, pointing out that the entire $850,000 in insurance money had ended up in his pocket, with no paper trail proving the existence of the massive spiritual debt. Ultimately, the jury delivered its verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to the ultimate punishment of life in prison without the possibility of parole, joining Bobby and Willie Guillory behind bars. Though the detectives took comfort in knowing that the physical killers and the mastermind were brought to justice, a quiet sense of injustice remained, knowing that Chow Tran walked free. Yet, as those who worked the case reflected on the long journey, they remained hopeful to the truth, having finally been dragged into the light. In the heart of Texas, where the bluebonnets bloom under an endless sky and the warmth of the community matches the summer, heat, a remarkable family sought to build a sanctuary of hope and prosperity. Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu, had traveled across the vast ocean from Vietnam in the year 2000, carrying nothing but their cherished traditions, a deep devotion to one another, and an unwavering belief in the American dream. They settled in Arlington, a vibrant city within Tarrant County, known for its rich tapestry of cultures and a bustling, supportive Vietnamese community that had flourished since the late 1970s. For Long and Hong, this new home was a canvas of endless possibilities. Together with their 3 children and their extended family, They established a commercial sewing business, pouring their hearts and souls into every stitch, seam, and fabric pattern. To bridge the gap between their heritage and their new environment, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old immigrant who possessed a natural charm and spoke fluent English. Chow became the friendly face of the enterprise, negotiating with contractors, managing local accounts, and presenting their exquisite craftsmanship to the wider business world. For nearly a decade, the sewing business thrived, culminating in a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a globally recognized commercial giant. Their modest workshop hummed with the cheerful sounds of sewing machines, light-hearted family chatter, and the sweet aroma of traditional tea. However, as the global economy shifted, the family faced unexpected hurdles. By the year 2011, the major contract began to dwindle, and the hum of the sewing machines grew quieter. The family found themselves facing financial strain, a challenge that tested their resilience but could not dampen their love for one another. In moments of uncertainty, people often look to their deepest cultural roots for comfort and guidance. For Long and Hong, their heritage was rich with spiritual traditions, ancestral respect, and the age-old practice of seeking blessings for harmony and prosperity. They believed that a string of misfortune could be lifted through proper spiritual alignment and guidance. Searching for a solution to restore their business to its former glory, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement in a local Vietnamese newspaper for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in the city of Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, promised to lift heavy burdens, remove obstacles, and restore good fortune to those in distress. Encouraged by the prospect of a brighter future, Chow made contact with her and arranged a consultation at her Houston residence. Initially, the family felt a renewed sense of hope. Daphne performed intricate rituals designed to invite success back into their lives. Yet, as the months passed, the economic situation remained stagnant, and the financial arrangement with Daphne began to spiral out of control. Unknown to the gentle elderly couple, a web of massive debts and hidden motives was quietly being spun around them. The turning point came on a warm morning on June 10, 2012. At 7:29 in the morning, the Arlington Police Department received a call from a distressed Chow Tran, requesting a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. He explained that his family had gathered outside the residence and noticed an open window and signs of disarray inside. Officer Weller, a seasoned officer with 14 years of experience, was the first to arrive on the scene. The quiet neighborhood stood in stark contrast to the growing anxiety of the family waiting outside. Upon entering the apartment, Officer Weller observed a home that appeared to have been ransacked, resembling a burglary. Determined to find the elderly couple and ensure their safety, he searched the living room, kitchen, and bathroom, finding them empty. Turning back toward the exit of the master bedroom, his flashlight illuminated hand smudges on the wall adjacent to a small closet. With a cautious heart, he opened the door and discovered the tragic scene. Long and Hong had been bound and hidden away, having succumbed to a cruel and senseless act of violence. The loss of this kind-hearted, generous couple, who had never harmed anyone and were deeply loved by their neighbors, sent shockwaves through the entire Arlington community. Arlington homicide detectives, including Detective Stewart, immediately launched a comprehensive investigation. In the master bedroom and living room, investigators discovered items that seemed intended to paint a specific picture: a blue bandana wrapped around a glass bottle, scattered pills, and a partially burned cigarette. To the experienced detectives, these clues appeared almost too deliberate, as if someone had meticulously staged the scene to make it look like local gang activity. As the detectives dug deeper, they discovered a significant life insurance policy totaling at least $1 million, with Chow Tran listed as a major beneficiary. When questioned, Chow explained that the policy was designed to protect and sustain the family business in the event of an untimely tragedy. He and his family provided solid accounts of their whereabouts on the night of the incident, leaving the police with no immediate physical evidence to connect anyone to the crime. For over 2 years, despite conducting dozens of interviews and collecting numerous biological samples, the case remained unresolved, sitting quietly on the detectives' desks as a solemn reminder of a search for justice. In the autumn of 2015, a sudden breakthrough illuminated the cold case. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had recently reached adulthood, was arrested in Houston on a felony charge involving the theft of a horse. Because a felony conviction requires the submission of a biological profile to the national database, Willie's details were entered into the system for the first time. Instantly, a match was found linking him directly to the cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene from 2012. When brought in for questioning, the weight of the truth proved too heavy for the young man to bear. Willie broke down and confessed, explaining that when he was 16 years old, his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had pressured him into assisting with a stage burglary in Arlington. Bobby had been given a key to the apartment to gain easy access. Willie revealed that the entire plot had been orchestrated by Daphne Wright, who had grown increasingly furious over unpaid debts that had ballooned to between $250,000 and $280,000. With this crucial information, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. In December of 2015, facing the reality of the evidence, Bobby confessed to his role, admitting he had been promised $10,000 by Daphne, a woman he described as a ruthless spiritual creditor who would stop at nothing to claim what she believed she was owed. The investigation soon shifted entirely toward Daphne Wright. In August of 2016, police executed a search warrant at her Houston home, discovering detailed financial ledgers outlining exorbitant fees for her spiritual services. The evidence painted a clear picture of a master manipulator who exploited the cultural beliefs and financial vulnerabilities of her clients. To secure a conviction against the mastermind of the plot, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand, describing how the family had fallen under Daphne's psychological control, believing she possessed immense spiritual powers that could harm them if they failed to pay. The defense argued that Chow was a complicit partner who sought to benefit from the insurance payout, but the jury ultimately focused on the overwhelming evidence against Daphne. In September of 2019, the jury delivered its verdict, convicting Daphne Wright of capital murder. She was sentenced to spend the remainder of her days in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she could never again exploit or harm another family. Though the journey to justice was long and filled with complex revelations, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu remains a testament to the enduring power of love, hard work, and the strong bonds of community that stood together to seek the truth. The story serves as a profound reminder of the importance of protecting the vulnerable, cherishing family, and trusting that light will always find a way to dispel the deepest shadows. The morning sun of June 10th, 2012, rose over Arlington, Texas, casting a pale, amber glow across the quiet suburban landscape. It was a Sunday, a day usually reserved for rest, family gatherings, and the gentle hum of lawnmowers. But at 7:29 in the morning, the calm was shattered by a phone call to the emergency dispatchers. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant whose voice trembled with a mixture of anxiety and deep-seated dread. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, sensing the rising panic in the man's voice, calmly asked for their names. Noting down the spelling of Long Nguyen, a man in his early 70s, Chow explained that his family had gathered outside the apartment, worry because no one was answering the door, and they had noticed an open window. His teenage son had gone up to knock, but only silence greeted him. Too terrified to step inside themselves, the family waited on the pavement, looking up at the quiet building, hoping against hope that their fears were groundless. Within minutes, Officer Weller, a seasoned patroller with 14 years of experience, arrived at the scene. He immediately recognized that this was not a typical welfare check. An entire extended family stood outside the apartment complex in the early hours of the morning, their faces drawn with worry. Upon entering the residence, Officer Weller was met with the classic signs of a burglary. The living room was in disarray. Drawers were pulled out and items were scattered across the floor. He called out, his voice echoing in the empty space, but received no reply. He checked the kitchen and the bathroom, finding them empty. Finally, he approached the bedroom. At first glance, the room seemed unoccupied, and he felt a brief wave of relief, thinking the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk. But as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. A sudden, instinctual hesitation gripped him. Every fiber of his being warned him of what might lie behind that door. Yet his duty compelled him to reach out and turn the handle. When the closet door swung open, the relief evaporated. Inside lay Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been bound tightly with duct tape, their heads and mouths covered, showing clear signs of a violent struggle. It was a sight that shook the veteran officer to his core. In a state of profound shock, he walked out of the bedroom into the middle of the living room, unable to speak or even use his radio for several long moments. When he finally regained his composure, he requested a supervisor and the crime scene unit. Soon, Detective Stewart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years on the force, arrived to take charge of the scene. Even for him, the level of violence was deeply unsettling. The apartment had been ransacked, with compact discs and furniture thrown about, suggesting a robbery. Yet, the extreme physical trauma suffered by the quiet, beloved elderly couple pointed to something far more sinister and personal. Neighbors and community members quickly gathered, expressing their disbelief. Long and Hong were known as a sweet, hard-working, and generous couple who had never bothered anyone and had no known enemies. The couple had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them their rich heritage and their beloved family. They settled in Arlington, a city in Tarrant County known for its vibrant and diverse cultural mix, including a large and supportive Vietnamese community. Like many who arrived after the fall of Saigon in 1975, they sought to build a legacy for their children and grandchildren. Long and Hong established a commercial sewing business, enlisting the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who spoke fluent English and became the public face of the enterprise, dealing with contractors and securing lucrative accounts, including a contract with a famous entertainment corporation. However, by the year 2011, their fortunes had taken a sharp downward turn. The loss of their major contracts threw the business into financial jeopardy. In their desperation, the family turned to traditional beliefs, hoping to find a spiritual solution to their mounting difficulties. In Vietnamese culture, it is not uncommon to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor during times of severe crisis, such as impending bankruptcy. Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement in a local newspaper for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who operated out of Houston, some 250 miles away. She claimed to possess the power to lift curses and bring good fortune. Hoping to save their business, Chow traveled to Houston to meet with Daphne. She performed rituals that temporarily restored their hope, but as the months passed, the financial situation did not improve. Instead, the family fell deeper into debt, not just to their business creditors, but to Daphne herself. She charged exorbitant fees for her services, and because the family could not pay, she extended them credit. Over time, This debt ballooned to an astronomical sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Back at the crime scene in 2012, detectives began to notice details that did not align with a simple robbery. A beer bottle wrapped in a light blue bandana had been left on a table, alongside crushed prescription pills and a discarded marijuana cigarette. While these items initially suggested the involvement of local youth gangs, investigators grew skeptical. The scene felt too perfectly arranged, almost as if it had been staged to mislead them. They collected the physical evidence, including the marijuana cigarette, hoping that deoxyribonucleic acid testing would eventually provide a breakthrough, though the initial searches of the National Genetic Database yielded no matches. As the investigation continued, Detective Stewart learned that the victims had a life insurance policy worth at least $1 million, with Chow Tran named as one of the primary beneficiaries. When questioned, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the family business. He and his family provided airtight alibis for the night of the murders, explaining that they had been celebrating Long's birthday at a family gathering until 10:30 in the evening, with no immediate forensic matches and no definitive evidence linking anyone to the crime. The case slowly went cold, remaining unresolved for over 3 years. The breakthrough finally came in October of 2015. A young man named Willie Guillory, who was 16 years old at the time of the murders, was arrested for a felony horse theft in Houston. Because he was now an adult with a felony charge, his genetic profile was entered into the national database. A routine comparison revealed a perfect match between Willie's genetic material and the residue found on the marijuana cigarette left at the crime scene. When confronted by Arlington detectives, Willie broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. His uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man with no prior criminal history, had recruited him for the job. Bobby, who was facing severe financial distress in 2012, had been offered $10,000 by Daphne Wright to carry out the deed. Daphne, desperate to collect the money she believed she was owed, had learned of the substantial life insurance policies. She believed that by eliminating the elderly couple, Chow and his wife would receive the payout and finally settle their massive debt with her. According to Bobby's subsequent confession, Daphne had provided him with a key to the apartment, which he claimed to have obtained directly from Chow Tran. On the night of June 9, 2012, Bobby and Willie drove to Arlington, entered the apartment, staged a burglary with the gang-related props, and waited for the couple to return. When Long and Hong walked through the door, the tragic confrontation occurred, resulting in their untimely deaths. Armed with these confessions, detectives arrested Daphne Wright at her Houston home in August of 2016. A search of her residence uncovered detailed financial ledgers showing that she regularly charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services, while Daphne remained cold and uncooperative, demanding her lawyer. Prosecutors began to piece together the full scope of the conspiracy. In exchange for his full testimony against Daphne, Bobby, and Willie, Chow Tran was offered immunity from prosecution. He portrayed Daphne as a manipulative and greedy figure who exerted an overwhelming psychological control over his family, claiming they were terrified of the spiritual curses she might place on them if they failed to pay. Chow even claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy Daphne, a claim that investigators found hard to believe, suspecting instead that financial gain was a powerful motivator for all involved. The trial of Daphne Wright commenced on August 26, 2019. Despite the defense's efforts to paint Chow Tran as an untrustworthy accomplice who walked away with the insurance money, the jury found Daphne guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the tragedy, although the detectives expressed lingering frustration that Chow Tran did not face criminal charges due to his immunity agreement. They found solace in the fact that the truth had finally been brought to light, proving that even the most carefully hidden secrets will eventually be revealed. The morning sun of Texas always had a way of rising with an intense, amber brilliance, casting long and quiet shadows across the sprawling suburban landscapes of Arlington. It was a city of unexpected contrasts, where wide paved roads stretched past modern commercial centers and quiet apartment complexes, nestled under the shade of massive oak trees. Here, thousands of miles away from their original home, a vibrant community of Vietnamese immigrants had spent decades weaving their own unique threads into the colorful fabric of the American dream. Among them were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu, an endearing elderly couple whose lives were defined by hard work, deep devotion to their family, and an unwavering commitment to the traditions of their homeland. For more than 20 years, Detective Stewart had walked the beat of the city. He was a veteran of the police force, a man whose quiet demeanor and sharp eyes had seen the absolute best and the absolute worst of human nature, having spent 21 years in the homicide division. He was no stranger to the darkness that could sometimes seep into the corners of quiet neighborhoods. Yet, nothing in his more than 2 decades of service could have prepared him for the silent weight that hung in the air on that warm summer morning of June 10th, 2012. It began at precisely 7:29 in the morning, when the quiet hum of the emergency dispatch center was interrupted by a call. The voice on the other end belonged to Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who sounded increasingly breathless and consumed by a growing sense of dread. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, trained to remain calm in the face of rising panic, gently asked for the names of the residents. Chow, his voice trembling as he spoke from outside the apartment complex, explained that his father-in-law was named Long Nguyen and was currently in his early 70s. He described how he, his wife, and his teenage son had gone to the apartment to check on them after being unable to reach them by phone. The family had gathered in the parking lot, their anxiety mounting with every passing minute. Chow had sent his young son to knock loudly on the heavy wooden front door, but there had been no response. No footsteps echoed from within. No familiar voices welcomed them. As the family stood outside, they noticed something that made their hearts sink further. One of the apartment windows was slightly open, and the blinds inside were skewed in a way that suggested sudden movement.